So Mike is with us because there's a really interesting documentary going to be on BT Sport tomorrow evening, Sunday evening at 6:30, called No Hunger in Paradise, and it is the documentary about the fascinating book that Mike wrote and investigated about youth football in this country. I watched it and I thought it was fascinating, and I sort of finished it by thinking, well, you highlighted some really serious issues with youth development in this country, but at the same time we're winning World Cups at youth level. So is our youth system in this country in good health or not?
I think if you look at it, what I tried to do was investigate the power of the dream, and the dream is embodied by the success, unprecedented success at international level that we've had this summer, but also the price of the dream. You know, the success rate is 0.012%. So what happens to the rest of the boys? And that was, you know, are these, they're commodities in many ways. I was interested in the way that parents dealt with their own sense of responsibilities in that, how clubs, you know, use the system for their own ends, how an industry has basically taken over innocence. And that was the thing that I wanted to look at. In overall terms, if you look at them technically, you know, you've seen them at Chelsea, Frank, in terms of the technical ability now of the young players, it's improved immeasurably over the last 3 to 4 years. But what I also wanted to do was just let's look at what happens when the dream dissolves.
Parents was the big takeaway for you from watching the
I watched it as well, and I took away parents because my nephew plays. And I'm fortunate because I came from a footballing background, so I grew up kind of aware of stuff. But I think parents now, from what I know at Chelsea, it's not the same across the board, but they're made very aware of the pitfalls for their sons, whether they're 8 or 12 or 14. The probabilities they won't make it. And then I think the parents seem to me to take on this kind of different sense of normality, where also my boy's going to be a superstar. And then they wonder, and they're complaining when the boys have been let go by the clubs. And I agree the clubs do have a duty of care, but they're also clambering for this massive contract for their boy. And then they cry their eyes out when their boy is let down and goes down a different path. And I just think that parents have to calm down everything. Go and play football at your club, educate yourself, work hard at school, play another sport, have another interest. And then if it all does come, the 99.7% or whatever it is, they have a backdrop. And I saw it and I thought, Kieran Bywater?
Kieran Bywater at West Ham, yeah.
At the end of the documentary speaks brilliantly, because he's actually gone through this whole process, and at the end of it he goes, if I could go back, I would have done all these things to broaden it, and I wouldn't have maybe have had the virtual breakdown he seemed to have.
Academy football is a brilliant people-watching business, you know, because you can actually get among the parents and you just earwig them, listen to them, and you see the envy, you hear the fear, and there's huge competitiveness between the parents, and there's a lot of bitchiness. And as you said, Frank, there's a lack of perspective. We're talking about young boys here. And the other thing I think we need to be aware of is that it's getting younger. There's a race to the bottom. You know, we've seen examples of clubs approaching boys of 3 years old, which is insane. You look around, say, in the Northwest, which is a huge area, there are 5 and 6 year olds who are at Manchester United one night, Manchester City the next, Everton the next, Liverpool the next. These kids have been taken out of their schools, they're eating in the back of the cars, they're 6 years old, they're children. That's where I think the duty of care comes in. It's too early, and as in the film, Gareth Southgate does say that you're going in too early on this. 6, 7. You can't tell a player at 7 years old.
It destroys childhoods. I mean, it does. You know, we always hear the success stories, but you know, if you're in the system from 3 to 16, you get rejected at 16. You know, you think it's going to be a natural progression. Their parents do, and then you get released. Your whole world falls apart.
Well, this is what Gareth had to say, actually. He features in the documentary. Here's a clip.
What I would say is that I think we take them too young. I don't see how anybody can take a 7 or 8 year old kid into an academy and realistically have a conversation with them or their family that talks about being a professional at the end, because for me, impossible. They might be a talent, but that is some journey you've got to go on. I worry that kids are signed up too early, and that the dream is there at an age where it's impossible for anybody to know what's going to happen.
So is this an issue of a lack of regulation? Because if you're Chelsea and you're competing against Man United, who are competing against Man City, who are competing against Liverpool, competing against Arsenal, and you're finding the best 6 or 7-year-olds, naturally you go, look for the best 4 or 5-year-olds, look for the best 3, and it's going to get lower and lower. As you say, it's a race to the bottom. And I think someone said in your documentary, if this was a hedge fund business and they were exploiting and grooming children for profit, which is exactly what's happening, then the regulation would be unbelievable. So where is the regulation for someone to step in and say, actually, it's not healthy. It's not healthy for a 3, 4, 5-year-old to be taken into an academy?
I think it's an under-regulated world, and you see this. You hear anecdotally of agents arranging transfers between academies for 12-year-olds. You hear of 13, 14-year-olds. There was one in particular offered a professional contract guaranteed to kick in when he's 17 at £45,000 a week. So if you're projecting that lifestyle, those riches on a young boy, it would fry his brains. It would fry my brains as an adult. So what are we doing with our kids in that sense? Are we selling them the dream, which ultimately, for most of them, will be an impossible dream?
I go back to the parents, and I might bore you, but I just do think that they have an awareness and a perspective. I think from Chelsea, which I know very well, and Arsenal, which I know from my nephew, they get looked after brilliantly. I think it's a fantastic childhood. You get a chance to play football, you get an opportunity, their boots are clean, the pitches are pristine, the coaches are telling them the right messages. They get counsellors, they get support, they get backup. I think as a parent, support. Take your boy there, brilliant, and people do this all the time, drive them around the motorway, take them there, and then let the clubs deal with them, but give them the idea that maybe every day, you might not make it, son. You have to educate yourself, do all these things, and then you give a backdrop, rather than they're pushing their boys down the route. And then,
what about the support mechanism when they get released, though?
No, I agree there should be a support mechanism, but it's the clubs then have to move on. That is the nature of it. It's like you leave university, you don't go and get a job. I can't go back to university and say, well, can you? It was your fault. You have to be aware that I'm in the big wide world now. I feel like it's I agree.
But it's hard when you're 12 and 13, isn't it? And you're with a club all those years, and all of a sudden you get rejected. And there doesn't seem to be that support mechanism.
There's an element of premature professionalism here, where you've got boys from the age of 9 almost encouraged, maybe subliminally, to actually think, this is my job. I talked to Sean Dyche about it recently, and Sean was saying, sometimes you'll see a boy at 16 to 18, and he's almost a husk because he's been through it all, he's been through the pressure, and it's overwhelmed him. Whereas if that same boy had a more normal childhood, multi-sport backgrounds maybe, better education or a longer education, those sort of players now are finding themselves at 18 to 20 in non-league football. They're the ones who bounce back. They're the ones who get to a pro club and think, I want this, I need this, and it's a completely different mindset.
It's just incredibly competitive, isn't it? It's dominated now by the top clubs. It's very difficult for a team like Norwich to compete, because if Norwich go out and find a great 6-year-old, well, you'd be guaranteed that Chelsea or someone else will be sniffing around, seeing what goes on, and off they go. Brentford, Huddersfield close on their academies. It said in your documentary, there's more Manchester City scouts in Huddersfield than there were Huddersfield scouts.
It seems like you have to be all in now, where years ago when I first started, you'd play a variety of sports and find your way. Now it's 6 years old and you have to dedicate your life to a football club. You can't play with your mates at school. That's wrong. That can't be right.
I think as a parent, don't get too excited. Support your son, and everyone's watching YouTube and the skills and what's being made. Actually, get them to watch this documentary. Get them to listen to an interview with Stephen Gerrard, who's speaking about it on the documentary, and actually show them that side. Just level it down a little bit, and then let them be.
Well, it's a fascinating documentary, and I wish we could have another half an hour to talk about it. Sadly, we haven't. But I just think, I do wonder whether winning these tournaments recently is going to change things. I wonder whether these young players are finally going to get more trust from coaches, more time from their parents to get, to be who they want to be. But it's absolutely worth watching. You can see it Sunday evening, 6:30 here on BT Sport 2.